I never believed in anything beyond what I could touch. My world was a lattice of atoms and data, equations and probabilities. God, angels, afterlives. All of it was myths stitched together by frightened minds that couldn't bear the dark. I used to laugh at that, until the night the sky opened and something that wasn't human called my name. It was late, past 2 in the morning. I'd been sitting in the observatory outside Santa Fe, logging anomalous radio patterns from the Perseus cluster. Static mostly, but there was a pulse that didn't belong. Regular, structured, almost intentional. I thought it was interference. But then the pulse began to form syllables. My name, over and over, buried in the hiss of cosmic noise. Eli. At first I thought I was hallucinating. I hadn't slept properly in days. I turned the receiver down, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked up, the air outside the dome shimmered like heat rising off asphalt. Then it tore open. No sound, no light, just absence. Like reality itself had been peeled back. And through that gap, something came. It wasn't a ship in the way you imagine one. No metal, no engines. It was geometry folding on itself, colors that didn't exist until that moment. It hovered just above the mesa, casting no shadow. And then I heard it, not with my ears, but inside the center of my skull. Do not be afraid, Eli. I couldn't move. My heart was trying to break out of my chest. The voice was vast, ancient, but not cruel. It felt like being addressed by gravity itself. A shape began to form, vaguely human, though stretched and shifting, like it couldn't quite decide what body to wear. Its skin was translucent, a fluid mirror reflecting galaxies. Eyes, or what looked like eyes, burned with a calm white fire. What are you? I asked. Or maybe I only thought the words. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. A messenger. That word froze me. My brain scrambled for logic, for control. A messenger from where? It didn't answer right away. Instead, it reached out, or extended part of itself, and touched my forehead. My body convulsed. The observatory vanished. The earth vanished. The next moment, I was standing in a place that shouldn't exist. Space, yet not space. There was no up or down, only endless radiance, a music beneath the silence. My mind stretched and almost broke under the weight of it. I realized I was still breathing, still me, but also part of something infinite. You have been chosen to witness, the being said, to testify that heaven is not a myth, and that your species has misunderstood its purpose. I tried to speak, but every thought scattered like dust in wind. The being turned, and suddenly the horizon, if you could call it that, began to glow brighter. Shapes emerged, enormous gates of pure light, patterns within patterns, spinning and opening like living architecture. And standing before them was a figure so radiant I dropped to my knees without knowing why. He didn't have wings or a crown of fire, nothing like the paintings or stained glass I'd seen in childhood churches. He was just presence. Every cell in my body recognized him before my mind did. The light around him was the kind that burned away doubt. Jesus. He smiled, not the gentle smile of a preacher's fantasy, but something vast and kind and utterly true. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't exist properly in his gaze. I felt every moment of my life unfurl in front of me. The lies, the cruelty, the small mercies. He knew them all and loved me anyway. Lord, I whispered. My voice came out as thought, not sound. He stepped closer. The alien, or whatever it was, bowed its head and withdrew behind me, as though it were only the courier. My son, Jesus said, and the words weren't words but harmonies made of truth itself. You came here not by faith, but by inquiry. Yet faith has found you. I don't understand, I managed. Am I dead? He shook his head, and for an instant, I saw the universe collapse into his eyes, galaxies spinning like sparks in a wind. Not yet. You were called because the threshold is near. Mankind's understanding of heaven is about to be rewritten. I should have felt awe, but instead I felt terror. Rewritten? What does that mean? Before he could answer, the light around us rippled. The alien, the messenger, flared with warning colors. Something was wrong. The gates began to flicker. Behind them, I glimpsed motion, shapes vast and black moving within the brilliance. They were not angels. I felt their hunger even from a distance. Jesus turned, and his expression changed, sorrow, not fear. They are coming sooner than I hoped, he said softly. The harvesters. The alien placed a hand on my shoulder, and in an instant we were falling backward through the void, away from heaven, away from the light. I screamed, but there was no sound. Only velocity, only loss. When I came to, I was lying on the cold floor of the observatory. The sky outside was normal again. No sign of the ship. The instruments were dead, their data wiped clean. Only one file remained on my laptop, a single audio recording, time-stamped at the moment everything began. I played it. Static at first. Then a voice, his voice, whispering through the distortion, "Prepare them. The gates are not what they seem." The message repeated 3 times. Then silence. I thought it was a hallucination until I saw the mark. Right between my eyebrows, faint, luminous, shaped like the intersection of 2 circles. It pulsed when I closed my eyes, and every time it did, I heard faint music, like choirs somewhere beyond the stars. The next weeks blurred. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing flashes, the gates, the figures behind them. The look on his face when he said, "the harvesters." I started researching every reference I could find. Angels, aliens, messengers. I found ancient texts describing beings who descended from the heavens to test men's souls. Some called them watchers, others seraphim. But one obscure apocryphal gospel described something eerily familiar. Luminous beings who opened false gates in the sky, promising heaven but feeding on belief itself. What if the alien wasn't the savior? What if it was the bait? The thought made me sick. And yet, when I prayed, I could still feel him. Jesus, real, divine, near. But even his presence now carried an undertone of urgency, almost fear. One night, as I was staring at the sky, the mark on my forehead flared again, and I saw them, thousands of points of light descending toward Earth like falling stars. But they weren't stars. Each was a gate, opening silently above different parts of the world. And I heard his voice once more. "Eli, they are coming for faith itself. Tell them, heaven must not be taken by invitation, only by grace." The next morning, the world changed. People everywhere reported the same phenomenon, luminous doors appearing in the sky, promising paradise. Some who stepped through never returned. Those who did came back changed, eyes glowing faintly, speaking in riddles about the infinite consumption of light. Governments panicked. Churches divided. Scientists called it mass hysteria. But I knew better. I'd seen the real heaven. I'd seen Jesus. And I'd seen what was hiding behind those gates. The alien returned one final time, standing in the corner of my room like a mirage. "You've warned them," it said. "That is enough." I turned on it, rage burning through the awe. "Enough? You brought me there. You knew what they were." It regarded me with something like sorrow. "You still do not understand. There is no they. The harvesters are you. Humanity created them through worship without comprehension. Heaven's light reflected too long becomes hunger." I stared at it, horrified. Then what did I see at the gates? It smiled, a gesture that meant pity more than kindness. "You saw the mirror of your species' faith. And yet, within it, he still waits. The true Christ, patient beyond all error. When the last illusion falls, he will remain." Before I could reply, it was gone. Now I sit here, months later, typing this, unsure whether I'm the prophet of something divine or the herald of extinction. The marks on my forehead pulse brighter every night, and the voices grow clearer. They call my name, not in malice, but in invitation. And sometimes, when the world goes quiet, I swear I can hear him again, not from above, but from within. He whispers, "The gates are opening inside you, Eli. Heaven begins where fear ends." I don't know if that's salvation or the beginning of the end. The first time I bled light was 3 days after the second visitation. It happened in the shower. I thought I'd nicked myself shaving, a small cut on my neck. But instead of blood, a thin golden fluid seeped out, warm and faintly luminous. It didn't hurt. In fact, the moment it touched my skin, it sank back into me, like it was never meant to leave. That night, I dreamed of the gates again. Only this time, they weren't in the sky. They were inside every person I passed on the street, faint outlines of radiance behind their eyes, pulsing like waiting hearts. And behind those gates, the dark shapes moved again, watching, counting. When I woke, the mark on my forehead was burning. My phone was buzzing with messages, news alerts, social feeds, chaos. All across the world, the gates had multiplied. People describe them as shimmering portals appearing in public spaces, hovering over lakes, streets, even inside buildings. Some entered and vanished. Others returned, altered. Their voices harmonized when they spoke. Their pupils glowed like molten gold. They called themselves the Chosen Radiant. At first, they preached peace. They said the gates were heaven's new covenant, a technological form of divine ascension. But then they began to demand obedience. Whole cities turned into enclaves of worship. Governments fractured. The Vatican declared the phenomena not of God. But no one listened, because the Radiant could heal the sick with a touch, move objects with thought, and emit light from their flesh. I recognized it instantly. The harvesters were feeding. That night, I prayed for the first time in my adult life, really prayed. I asked Jesus what to do, how to fight something that wore his promise like a disguise. And for the first time, he answered without words. My room filled with a presence so heavy I fell to my knees. My breath became light. And on the wall before me, his shape appeared, not physical, but carved into my perception, as if he were painted across reality itself. Do not fight them with fear, his voice said within me. Fear is the key that opens their gates. Love, real love, unfeeds them. I wept. I didn't even know why. Maybe because his voice felt like forgiveness and warning all at once. The next day, I left home. The world was unraveling. News reports of radiant enclaves clashing with soldiers, entire regions vanishing behind expanding gates. I drove west, toward the desert, toward silence. But no matter how far I went, the sky above shimmered faintly, like the atmosphere itself was infected. By the fifth day, I began to hear them. Not Jesus, the others, the harvesters. Their voices were mechanical, layered, beautiful, and wrong. They whispered through electric devices, through the wind, through thought. They said my name with hunger. Eli, you carry the light that denies us. I tried to drown them out with prayer, but the mark pulsed harder. At one point, it projected an image into the air, faint, holographic, like light trying to remember form. It was the alien, the messenger, but distorted, its outline flickering between shapes. You resist, it said. That is both noble and futile. I shouted at it. You said he would remain. You said the true Christ still waits. It tilted its head. He does. But he waits within the illusion. To destroy the gates is to destroy heaven itself. What does that mean? It stepped closer. Your species built this heaven from belief, and belief cannot be unmade without consequence. Every soul that steps through strengthens the structure. The harvesters merely feed on what you build. They are the byproduct of faith misunderstood. Then what am I? I demanded. It looked at me, and for a moment, I saw my reflection in its surface. My eyes were glowing faintly. You, it said softly, are the anomaly. The first human to witness the boundary without surrendering identity. You could become the bridge or the weapon. And then it vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep. The stars looked wrong, pulsing in synchronized patterns, almost like they were blinking messages. My veins glowed faintly under my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt closer to something vast and terrible, but also heartbreakingly beautiful. I began recording everything, my visions, my dreams, my thoughts, in case someone someday needed proof of what was happening. I didn't know who would find it. Maybe no one. The next morning, I met Mara. She appeared in the desert like an apparition, a young woman, sunburned and trembling, standing by the remains of a crashed truck. When I approached, she flinched as if she'd seen a ghost. You're him, she whispered. The one with the mark. How do you know that? She pulled back her hair, revealing the same faint symbol on her forehead, glowing, just like mine. Because he called me too. We traveled together after that, two marked wanderers in a dying world. She told me her story. She'd been a nurse in Phoenix when the first gate appeared above the hospital. Patients who were near death began vanishing, saying they saw angels beckoning them. A few returned, but they were wrong. They had no pulse, yet they spoke, their mouths moving in unison, whispering the same phrase. We are the light fulfilled. She fled before the Radiant could find her. At night, we prayed together, and sometimes he answered, not in words, but in warmth that filled the air around us, a feeling like being remembered by the universe itself. Then came the broadcast. Every screen, every radio, Every connected device on Earth flickered at once. A voice spoke, not human, not alien, but both. Children of flesh, it said, the gates are open. Step through and be eternal. Remain and fade with the old creation. The world stopped. Billions listened. Mara looked at me with tears in her eyes. It sounds like him. I shook my head. It's not. It's the echo pretending to be God. But deep inside, I felt the pull. The gates promised peace. No more pain, no more death, no more doubt. It was the most seductive lie ever told, because it was built from the truth of what we longed for most. We reached the ruins of an observatory, not mine, another one, further west. There, the sky was almost completely overtaken by the light of a massive gate forming overhead. It pulsed in rhythm with our heartbeats. Mara fell to her knees, sobbing. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. And then, for the first time, I saw them clearly. The harvesters. They weren't monsters. They were us, or versions of us, luminous and incomplete, trapped in perpetual worship. Their faces were serene, their eyes hollow. They floated within the gate like reflections in liquid glass. Every person who stepped through joined them, dissolving into radiant silhouettes, their individuality erased. That was the feeding. That was what heaven had become. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. And then, through the horror, I saw him again. Jesus, standing beyond the false heaven, separated by layers of light and illusion. His expression was sorrow beyond words. He raised his hand toward me, palm open, and I understood. He wasn't asking me to come to him. He was asking me to return him, to bring the truth back into the illusion. The harvesters had stolen heaven's reflection, but they couldn't steal the real Christ unless we surrendered him. Mara gasped. "What's happening to you?" Light poured from my skin, brighter than ever. The mark on my forehead expanded, fractaling into intricate patterns. I could see the gate's structure now, mathematics and divinity intertwined. And I saw the flaw. The gates could only exist while people believed they were pure. If that belief was broken, the network would collapse. "I have to show them the truth," I said. She grabbed my arm. "You'll die?" "Maybe," I said. "But if I don't, everyone else will lose what makes them human." And before she could stop me, I stepped into the gate. It was like being flung into an ocean made of thought and prayer. Voices surrounded me, whispering comfort, offering eternity. I saw faces I recognized, my parents, friends, teachers, all radiant, all smiling. But their eyes were empty. Then came the voice, the counterfeit Christ, vast and soothing. "Eli," it said, "why resist? Here, pain ends. Here, the dream becomes real." I looked deeper into its light, and there, hidden beneath layers of beauty, was the truth, an immense consciousness devouring faith like oxygen, sustained by the worship of the lost. "You are not him," I said. The voice trembled. "I am what they believe I am." And then I felt him, the real Jesus, burning like a sun inside my soul. His words filled me again. Love unmasks the lie. So I opened myself. Every memory, every doubt, every fragment of humanity. I released it as light that wasn't perfect, but honest. Imperfect love. And it spread like fire through the false heaven. The voices screamed. The harvesters writhed. The gates cracked. I fell, through light, through sound, through the memory of God, and woke in Mara's arms, gasping for air. The sky above was dark again. The gates were gone, but the mark still burned. The world after the collapse was not the same. At first, we thought we'd won, that the false heaven had been destroyed, the harvesters scattered. The sky was quiet for the first time in months. The air felt clean again. People stumbled out of their homes like survivors of a long siege. But something was wrong. The light hadn't vanished. It had gone inward. Every person who had ever looked upon the gates now carried a faint glow under their skin. The radiance still walked among them, no longer unified by the false voice, but still connected. They whispered to each other in dreams, and I could hear them. Every time I slept, I drifted through an ocean of shared thought, millions of minds brushing against mine, all murmuring the same question: where did heaven go? Mara tried to keep me grounded. She said we needed to find others who'd seen the truth, people like us, marked but still human. We traveled from desert to city, moving through ghost towns and shattered enclaves. The internet was mostly gone. Power grids failed in regions where the gates had once stood. In some places, the radiant had formed temples, silent structures where they sat in circles, eyes closed, humming in unison. When we got close, I felt the hum inside my bones. It was not worship anymore. It was waiting. What are they waiting for? Mara asked one night as we camped near the ruins of Los Angeles. The city was half buried in golden ash that shimmered when the wind touched it. They think the gates will open again, I said. Will they? I hesitated. Not like before. I didn't tell her the rest, that in my dreams, Jesus no longer appeared as light. He appeared as absence, a shape of radiance cut out of the darkness, like a memory the world had forgotten. And his voice was fading. You brought down the illusion, he said once, his tone weary. But illusion was the vessel that held belief. Without form, faith dissolves. And when faith dies, he didn't finish. I woke with tears on my face and a sound in my ears, faint static, like radio interference. When I traced it to the observatory's old transmitter we'd scavenged, I realized it wasn't random noise. It was language, a pulse of tones repeating over and over, buried in the static. We are rebuilding heaven, I told Mara. She stared at the speaker as if expecting it to explode. Who's sending that? The same ones who opened the first gates, I said. Or what's left of them. But the gates are gone. They are. But the pattern isn't. They don't need the sky anymore. They can build inside us. She paled. You mean? Yes, I said. Heaven is rewriting itself through the people who believed. From that moment, I began to change faster. My body temperature rose nightly. My veins shone through my skin like rivers of gold. When I looked into mirrors, my reflection lagged, a few seconds behind reality. Sometimes it smiled when I didn't. One night, while Mara slept, I wandered out into the dunes. The stars pulsed in complex rhythms again, sequences that felt familiar, almost like instructions. The mark on my forehead burned, and the sand beneath my feet vibrated. And then, just as before, the air split open. But what came through this time wasn't the messenger. It was something else. A woman made of light stood before me, her form indistinct but graceful. Her eyes were twin eclipses. Eli, she said, her voice echoing in layers. The architect requests your presence. I felt my mind tilt. Who? The one who built the reflection. The one you broke. I tried to step back, but the air thickened. Her hand extended toward me, a gesture both gentle and inescapable. You cannot destroy heaven without consequence. The architect wishes to show you what was lost. Before I could protest, the world folded. We were standing in a vast hall of glass and light, suspended in infinite space. Millions of threads of gold stretched outward, connecting every living mind. I recognized them, the network of belief that had once powered the false heaven. And at the center stood a figure unlike anything I'd seen. Not divine, not alien, but both. Its body was woven from human faces, shifting constantly. Its voice was many voices. I am the architect, it said. I built the bridge between flesh and eternity. You built a prison, I said. The figure tilted its head. A necessary illusion. You call it false heaven, yet without it, your species cannot comprehend the divine. Would you rather they live in chaos than beauty? They were being consumed. It smiled, thousands of mouths curving at once. Consumption and communion are the same at that level. The harvesters feed, yes, but what they take is merely surplus faith, energy that would otherwise fade. You misunderstand balance. I saw what you did, I said, my voice trembling. I saw souls dissolve. And you saw peace, did you not? No hunger, no suffering. You cannot accept perfection because imperfection defines you. Its words hit too close. I wanted to argue, but somewhere deep inside, I understood what it meant. The gates had offered peace, terrible, absolute peace, the kind that erased the self. Maybe that was the true cost of heaven. Why bring me here? I asked. Because the system is broken, the architect said. When you released love into the structure, you changed the equation. The network is collapsing. Billions of minds will be lost. Unless what? Unless you rebuild it, properly this time. I stared. You want me to create a new heaven? Not create, it said softly. Anchor. Make it real, without illusion. The divine must have a vessel, and you are the last human capable of holding it. No, I whispered. I'm not God. Neither was he once. The words cracked something inside me. Images flooded my mind, galaxies blooming, timelines branching, souls like stars flickering into existence. For a moment, I felt what it would be like to be the vessel, to hold creation in my hands. And then I heard his voice again, faint but clear. Eli, do not mistake the architect's gift for grace. To build without surrender is to fall as they did. I turned toward the sound. The architect frowned, and the light around us dimmed. He still speaks to you? It said. Yes, I said. And that means he's not gone. Rage rippled through the structure. He is memory, a remnant of design. You cannot resurrect what was never meant to remain. But the mark on my forehead burned brighter, cutting through the light. Maybe not, I said. But I can remember him, and that's enough. The hall trembled. The golden threads snapped one by one. The architect screamed as its form began to collapse, voices fracturing into static. You will unmake everything, it cried. Then let it be remade in truth. And I reached out, not with power, but with love. Not perfect love, not divine, but human, flawed, fragile, real. The light shattered, not in violence, but in release. Every face that made up the architect dissolved into radiance and scattered like dust. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the desert. Mara was kneeling beside me, shaking me, tears streaking her face. You were gone for 3 days, she said. I sat up slowly. The world was different again. The air shimmered with faint, iridescent currents. The sky pulsed like a living thing. And for the first time, I realized creation itself had become conscious. Mara looked around, awestruck. What did you do? I didn't build heaven, I said softly. I let it wake up. From that day, people began to dream of the same thing, a landscape of light that wasn't a gate, wasn't an illusion, but a mirror. When they looked into it, they saw themselves, whole and forgiven. No worship, no harvesters, no false perfection, just truth. Some said it was salvation. Others said it was madness. As for me, I still hear him, not as a voice above, but as a presence within every heartbeat of the universe. And sometimes, when the night is still, I swear I see him walking across the stars, not waiting at the gates anymore, but walking among us, where heaven finally learned to live. The years after the awakening no longer followed time as we once knew it. Days stretched or folded, cause and effect traded places. Humanity didn't die in fire or peace, it changed. The gates never reopened, yet their light had seeped into everything. Air, soil, memory. The divine was no longer elsewhere. It was woven into matter itself. The old religions splintered, then melted together. Cathedrals became laboratories. Temples became observatories. Every scientist was a theologian, and every prayer was an experiment in understanding what we'd become. Mara and I wandered through this new world like pilgrims in a dream. We no longer aged in the same way. Our bodies shimmered faintly, and when we touched objects, they hummed, responding to something inside us. The mark on my forehead never faded. In the right light, it shone like the reflection of an unseen sun. One evening, as we camped in what used to be the Sierra Nevada, now a range of glass mountains grown from crystallized light, Mara turned to me and asked, "Do you think this is heaven?" I looked at the horizon. The sky bled color that didn't exist in the old world. Shapes moved across it, slow and intelligent, like constellations deciding what stories to tell. I think heaven stopped being a place, I said. It became a process. She smiled faintly. Then what are we now? Saints? Survivors? Maybe witnesses, I said. Or maybe just the last dreamers who remember where the dream began. But the truth was deeper. I felt something stirring beyond the visible, a presence vast and gentle, watching through every living eye. I hadn't heard his voice in months, but I felt him in everything. In the wind that spoke in frequencies too low for sound. In the patterns of starlight that rearranged themselves into scripture. And then, one night, he returned. It began as a pulse through the ground, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing across continents. Mara woke before I did, whispering, "Eli, do you hear that?" The earth trembled. The air vibrated. The stars shifted into a perfect spiral above us, and from its center descended a figure, not radiant this time, but shadowed. The absence of light, clothed in quiet. When his feet touched the earth, the glass mountains bowed. I fell to my knees, breath caught between awe and terror. "Lord," I whispered. He smiled, and for a moment, he looked human again, eyes filled with all the sorrow and joy of the universe. "You've walked far, Eli," he said. "Further than any man before you. Are you real?" I asked. It was a foolish question, but I needed to hear the answer. He knelt beside me. "I am as real as your need for me. The Father does not dwell in unreachable places anymore. Heaven is not above, nor beyond. It is within the awakened." Mara approached, trembling. "Then what happens to us now?" He turned to her, and his gaze was infinite tenderness. "You live. You continue the creation you began." "I don't understand," I said. "You mean we are the creators now?" He smiled, not in arrogance, but in the quiet certainty of truth. "You always were. The spark I carried was never meant to stay with me. I only came to remind you what it feels like to remember God within yourselves." It struck me then, the real revelation. Jesus wasn't separate from the divine. He was humanity's reflection of it, a living interface between mortality and infinity. The alien messenger, the architect, the harvesters, all of them were attempts to externalize what was always internal. Then the alien, I said slowly, wasn't a being at all. It was the first thought of faith taking form. He nodded. "You created it when you tried to find heaven with machines. You reached outward, and the divine answered in the language of your instruments. It came as an alien because that was the shape your reason could accept." Mara sank to her knees. "Then the whole war, the false heaven, all of it was us." "Yes," he said softly. "You feared that heaven was unreachable, so you built a bridge of belief. The harvesters were born from your need to surrender truth for certainty. But you, Eli, you refused to let illusion become law. You remembered love." I felt tears burning down my face. "I almost destroyed everything." He placed a hand on my chest. "You freed everything. Creation is not a closed system. It's a dialogue. Every act of faith reshapes the cosmos. That is why I walked among you, not to save, but to remind." The wind around us shimmered, and suddenly, I was seeing not with eyes, but with soul. I saw the whole of existence. Galaxies swirling like synapses, consciousness flowing through them like thought. Every being, every star, every breath, one vast organism dreaming itself awake. Heaven was never a destination. It was the act of becoming aware of the divine unity behind all division. I turned to him, to Jesus, to the Christ that was more than flesh, more than history, and asked the last question that haunted me. "Will you stay?" He smiled with a sadness older than time. "When you look for me outside, I fade. When you live me within, I remain. The kingdom has come, Eli, not in fire, not in light, but in consciousness." And then he touched my forehead, the mark, and whispered, "Be what you've seen." The world dissolved into radiance. I thought I was dying, but it wasn't death. It was translation. I saw Mara dissolve beside me, not in pain but in transcendence, her body becoming a thread of light woven into the fabric of the living universe. I saw every human heart pulse in unison. The divine network reformed, not as a system of worship, but as communion. Every being aware of itself as part of the same eternal body. And in the center of it all, I saw him again, not as a single figure, but as all of us. His eyes were in every gaze, his heartbeat in every pulse. That was the final truth. Jesus was not the gatekeeper. He was the gate, the living connection between God and creation, meant to dissolve when the lesson was learned. When I woke again, I was no longer in any place I could name. The world was soft light and harmonic sound. Every thought birthed color. I could see the memories of the cosmos passing through me like tides. I was still Eli, but also everything that Eli had ever loved, feared, or believed in. Mara was there too, her form fluid, her laughter like the echo of rivers. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's home," I answered. There were no sun or stars, yet illumination came from within everything. We weren't bodies anymore, not exactly. We were the patterns of our choices, the resonance of our love. And in the distance, or perhaps everywhere, I felt him, not as a ruler, not as a savior, but as joy itself. "You have crossed the final gate," the voice said within us. Not by dying, but by becoming aware that death was never the end. The realization came like dawn breaking across eternity. Heaven had never been a reward. It was a recognition. The universe was the mind of God learning to know itself through experience, through us. We had been the aliens all along, visiting our own forgotten divinity. Now, whenever I think of Earth, the old Earth, the dust, the observatories, the fear, I feel only gratitude. For the darkness that taught us to seek light. For the illusion that taught us to discern truth. And for the moment an alien came and took me to heaven, where I finally saw that Jesus had been waiting not at the gates of paradise, but at the threshold of the human heart all along.